The massive space station called Harmony Point floated in the darkness between stars. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its many ports every day. Traders, diplomats, and travelers from across the galaxy came here to meet and do business. The station was neutral ground where even enemies could talk in peace. Today was special. The most powerful warship anyone had ever seen approached the station. It was black as space itself and covered in weapon ports. This was the flagship of Empress Nara, ruler of the Valeth Empire. Her people were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors who conquered worlds and never showed weakness. Inside the ship, Empress Nara stood before a large window looking out at the station. She was tall and strong, with dark blue skin and silver markings that showed her royal blood. Her face was hard as stone, showing no emotion. She had ruled her empire for 20 years and had never lost a battle. Behind her sat a young girl in a special chair with wheels. This was Princess Hana, the Empress's daughter. She was 12 years old, but looked smaller than other children her age. Her legs did not work the way they should, and she needed the chair to move around. In Valeth culture, this made her weak and shameful. "Mother, do I have to stay hidden again?" Hana asked in a quiet voice. She had been kept away from public events for most of her life. The other Valeth nobles said she was a bad sign for the royal family. Nara did not turn around. "Yes, the peace talks are too important. We cannot show any weakness to the other species." Her voice was cold and official, the way she spoke to her generals. Hana looked down at her hands. She was used to being hidden, but it still hurt every time. She was smart and loved to read about other worlds, but no one seemed to care about that. They only saw her broken legs. The ship docked at Harmony Point with a loud clang. Soon, Empress Nara walked through the station's corridors with her guards around her. She wore her finest armor and carried herself like the warrior queen she was. People from many different species stopped and stared as she passed. Some bowed, others moved quickly out of her way. Princess Hana followed behind in her chair, pushed by a servant. She wore a simple dress and a hood that covered most of her face. The servant had been told to keep her away from crowds and cameras. The peace talks were being held in the station's main conference room. Leaders from 12 different species had come to discuss trade agreements and border disputes. Empress Nara was here because her empire controlled key shipping routes that everyone needed to use. After the first day of meetings, Nara decided to eat at the station's best restaurant. It was called Terra's Table and was run by humans. She had heard that humans were a young species that had only recently joined the galactic community. They were said to be weak but clever. The restaurant was beautiful, with plants from many worlds and soft music playing. The tables were set with care and the lighting was warm and peaceful. It was very different from the cold metal halls of Valeth ships. A young human man approached their table. He was about 24 years old with kind eyes and a gentle smile. His name tag said Day in several languages. He bowed politely to the Empress. "Welcome to Terra's Table, Your Majesty," Day said in careful Valeth. His accent was strange but understandable. "My name is Day and I will be taking care of you tonight." Nara looked at him with cold eyes. She was not used to such informal behavior from servants. On Valeth worlds, no one would dare speak to her without being spoken to first. But this was neutral space and she needed to follow local customs. "We require your finest food," she said, "and privacy." Day nodded and showed them to a table in a quiet corner. The table had been specially prepared with a space for Princess Hana's chair. Day had noticed she was in a wheelchair and had quietly arranged things to make her comfortable. He did not stare or ask questions about her condition. As Day brought their food, he noticed that the young princess seemed sad. She barely touched her meal and kept looking around the restaurant with curious eyes. There were beings from many different species eating together, talking and laughing. Some of them also had wheelchairs or other devices to help them move around. No one seemed to think this was strange or shameful. Empress Nara ate quickly and in silence. She was thinking about the next day's negotiations. The humans wanted to join a major trade alliance, but many species thought they were too young and inexperienced. The Valeth had not decided whether to support them or not. After they finished eating, Nara stood up to leave. She had more meetings to attend and reports to read. Princess Hana started to follow, but her chair got stuck on the edge of a carpet. The servant who was supposed to help her had stepped away for a moment. Day saw what happened and quickly came over. "Here, let me help," he said gently. He carefully moved the carpet and made sure the wheels were free. These old stations can be tricky to navigate. Princess Hana looked up at him with surprise. Most people either ignored her or treated her like she was made of glass. Day just smiled at her like she was any other customer. "Thank you," she said quietly. It was the first time she had spoken to anyone except her mother and servants all day. "You're very welcome," Day replied. "I hope you enjoyed your dinner. Maybe I'll see you again tomorrow." Before Hana could answer, her mother called her name sharply. The Empress had been watching the interaction with disapproval. In her culture, royal family members did not talk to servants, especially not human ones. That night, back on her ship, Empress Nara could not stop thinking about what she had seen. The human waiter had treated her daughter like a normal person, not like something to be ashamed of. It made her feel uncomfortable in a way she could not explain. Princess Hana lay in her bed looking out at the stars. For the first time in a long while, she felt like someone had seen her as more than just her wheelchair. The human named Day had been kind without being fake about it. She hoped they would go back to the restaurant tomorrow. In the restaurant, Day was cleaning tables and getting ready to close. His manager, a woman named Yuna, came over to talk to him. "I saw you helping the Valeth princess today," Yuna said. "That was good of you. But be careful. Their culture is very different from ours. They might not understand kindness the way we do." Day nodded. He knew that different species had different customs, but he also believed that kindness was something everyone could understand, even if they showed it in different ways. "I just treated her like I would want to be treated," he said. "She seemed lonely." Yuna smiled. "That's what makes humans special, Day. We see people, not just their differences." As Harmony Point grew quiet for the night cycle, 3 very different people thought about their brief meeting. An empress wondered if strength always had to mean hardness. A princess dreamed of a place where she could be herself, and a waiter hoped he had made someone's day a little brighter. None of them knew that this simple act of kindness would soon change the fate of an entire empire. The next day brought more peace talks and more tension. Empress Nara sat through hours of boring speeches and complicated trade agreements. Different species argued about shipping routes and mining rights. The humans presented their case for joining the trade alliance, but many of the older species still thought they were too young and weak. During a break in the meetings, Nara decided to return to Terra's table for lunch. The food had been good, and the quiet atmosphere helped her think. Princess Hana came with her again, still pushed by the same silent servant. This time, the restaurant was busier. Beings from many different worlds sat at tables throughout the dining room. There were tall, thin aliens with 6 arms, short, furry creatures that looked like walking teddy bears, and several other humans working as staff. Day saw them come in and smiled. He quickly prepared the same quiet table they had used the day before. As he led them over, he noticed that Princess Hana's wheelchair looked different. It had more controls and small lights that blinked in patterns. "Good afternoon, Your Majesty," Day said to the Empress. Then he turned to Hana with the same respectful tone. "Good afternoon, Your Highness. How are you today?" Hana was surprised that he spoke to her directly. Most people only talked to her mother, as if she could not speak for herself. "I am well, thank you," she said, her voice still quiet but a little stronger than yesterday. They ordered their food, and Empress Nara began reading reports on her tablet. The negotiations were not going well. Several species were forming groups against each other, and she was starting to think the whole peace process might fail. While she was busy reading, Princess Hana watched the other customers in the restaurant. At one table, a human family was celebrating a birthday. The child getting presents was about her age and was laughing loudly at something his father said. At another table, an alien couple was sharing a meal and talking softly to each other. Suddenly, Hana's wheelchair made a loud beeping sound. The lights on the control panel started flashing red and the chair stopped moving. Hana pressed buttons, but nothing happened. The chair's computer voice said in Valeth, "System error. Mobility functions disabled." Other customers began to notice. Some stared openly at the broken chair and the young alien girl sitting in it. A group of traders from a species called the Korthax pointed at her and made clicking sounds that meant laughter in their language. One of them said loudly in Galactic Common, "Look, the great Valeth princess is broken just like her chair." Hana's face turned dark purple, which showed embarrassment in her species. She tried to make herself smaller in the chair and pulled her hood up to hide her face. Tears started to form in her eyes, but she knew she could not cry in public. That would be even more shameful. Empress Nara heard the commotion and looked up from her reports. She saw her daughter's distress and the other customers staring. Her first thought was to call her guards and have everyone who had looked at Hana arrested. But this was a neutral space and she could not use force here. Before she could decide what to do, Dee appeared at their table. He had seen what happened and came over immediately. He did not look at the broken chair or act like there was a problem. Instead, he knelt down next to Hana so they were at the same eye level. "Hey," he said softly. "These things happen with technology, right? My tablet broke yesterday right in the middle of an important message." Hana looked at him with surprise. He was not treating this like a disaster or something shameful. He was just talking to her like it was a normal problem that could be fixed. "The repair technician will be here soon," Day continued. "But while we wait, would you like to hear some music? I know some songs from my home world that are pretty relaxing." Hana nodded slowly. She had never heard human music before. Day began to hum a gentle tune. It was a lullaby his grandmother had sung to him when he was small. The melody was simple but beautiful, rising and falling like waves on a peaceful ocean. As he hummed, something magical happened. The other customers stopped staring and went back to their own conversations. The music seemed to create a bubble of calm around their table. Even Empress Nara found herself listening, though she tried to pretend she was still reading her reports. When the song ended, Hana smiled for the first time that day. "That was beautiful," she said. "What was it about?" "It's about a little bird who learns to fly even though one of her wings is different from the other birds," Dee explained. "My grandmother always said that everyone finds their own way to soar." Hana thought about this. In all the stories she had been told growing up, heroes were always perfect and strong. She had never heard a story about someone who was different but still did amazing things. "Would you like to dance while we wait?" Day asked suddenly. "My grandmother also taught me that dancing is not about your feet. It's about your heart and how the music makes you feel." Hana looked scared. "But I cannot walk." "How can I dance?" Day smiled and held out his hand. "There are many ways to dance. May I show you?" Hana looked at her mother, who was watching with a strange expression on her face. Nara did not know what to say. In Valeth culture, dancing was for celebrations after military victories. It was not something done in restaurants by disabled children and alien waiters, but something in Day's kind eyes made Hana trust him. She took his hand with her own small blue one. What happened next was unlike anything anyone in the restaurant had ever seen. Day began to move slowly around Hana's chair, still holding her hand. He showed her how to move her arms in time with the music he hummed. He spun gently so that she could watch his movements and copy them with her upper body. Soon Hana was laughing and moving her arms like graceful waves. Day moved in a circle around her, sometimes close, sometimes farther away, but always connected to her through the rhythm and the joy on her face. Other customers began to smile and some even clapped softly. The dance was not about what Hana could not do. It was about what she could do. Her movements were fluid and beautiful. Her face was bright with happiness. For those few minutes, she was not a disabled princess or a shameful secret. She was just a young girl dancing with a friend. Empress Nara watched her daughter and felt something crack inside her chest. She had never seen Hana look so happy or so alive. The child she thought was weak and broken was graceful and full of light. How had she been so blind? When the dance ended, the whole restaurant applauded. The repair technician had arrived and was working on the wheelchair, but no one seemed to care about that anymore. They had just witnessed something beautiful and pure. Day bowed to Princess Hana like she was the most important person in the galaxy. "Thank you for the dance, Your Highness. You are a wonderful dancer." Hana was glowing with pride. "Thank you for showing me how. I never knew I could dance." "You can do anything you set your mind to," Day said. "Sometimes we just need someone to help us see our own strength." The wheelchair was fixed quickly, and soon it was time for Empress Nara to return to her meetings. But as they left the restaurant, she kept thinking about what she had seen. Her daughter had not needed to be fixed or hidden. She had needed to be seen and celebrated. That night, Nara stood again at the window of her ship, looking out at the stars. But this time, she was not thinking about the peace talks or military strategies. She was thinking about a human waiter who had shown her daughter something she had never been able to give her: the feeling that she was perfect exactly as she was. In her room, Princess Hana was practicing the arm movements Day had taught her. She hummed the lullaby he had sung and imagined she was that little bird with the different wing, learning to fly in her own special way. And in the restaurant, Day cleaned the last tables of the day and smiled. He did not know that he had just planted a seed that would grow into something big enough to change an empire. He only knew that he had helped a lonely girl remember how to smile. The third day of peace talks began badly. 3 different species had walked out of the negotiations, and 2 others were threatening to leave. The humans were still trying to prove they deserved a place in the trade alliance, but their peaceful nature made some aliens think they were weak. Empress Nara was getting frustrated with all the arguing. As the leader of the strongest military force in the galaxy, she was used to solving problems with clear commands and quick action. These endless debates made her want to grab her sword and settle things the old way. During the lunch break, she headed to Terra's table again. It had become a habit now, though she told herself it was just because the food was good and the location was convenient. She did not want to admit that she was curious to see more of the strange human kindness she had witnessed. Princess Hana was excited to go back. She had been thinking about the dance all night, and had even asked her personal servant to play some music so she could practice the arm movements. The servant had looked confused but followed orders. When they arrived at the restaurant, Day greeted them with his usual warm smile. But this time something was different. Princess Hana was sitting up straighter in her chair, and she looked directly at Day when he spoke to her. "Good afternoon," she said clearly, before he could speak first. "I have been practicing the dance you taught me." Day's eyes lit up. "That's wonderful. I would love to see your progress sometime." Empress Nara watched this interaction with growing unease. Her daughter was acting more confident and independent than she had ever seen before. In Velith culture, this could be seen as disrespectful behavior from a child, especially one who was supposed to stay quiet and hidden. After they ordered their food, Nara made a decision. "Princess Hana, please go with your servant to the wash facilities. I need to speak with the waiter alone." Hana looked disappointed but obeyed. When she was gone, Empress Nara turned to face Day with her full imperial presence. Her voice was cold and commanding. "Human, you will explain your behavior toward my daughter." Day felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard stories about Velith interrogations, but he straightened his shoulders and looked the Empress in the eye. "Your Majesty, I have only tried to be kind to a young person who seemed lonely. If I have done something wrong, I apologize." "Kindness?" Nara's voice was sharp. "You have made her think she can behave like a normal child. You have given her false hope about her place in the world. In my culture, what you call kindness would be called cruelty." Day was quiet for a moment, thinking carefully about his words. He knew that one wrong statement could cause serious problems, not just for him but for all the humans on the station. "Your Majesty, may I ask you something? What do you see when you look at your daughter?" The question surprised Nara. "I see weakness. I see shame. I see a reminder that even the strongest bloodlines can produce flawed children." Day nodded slowly. "I understand that is your culture's way of thinking. But when I look at Princess Hana, I see intelligence, curiosity, and courage. I see a young person who faces challenges every day that would break many adults, and she does it with grace." "Grace does not win battles," Nara replied firmly. "Strength does. Power does. In the real galaxy, the weak are consumed by the strong. With respect, Your Majesty, I think there are different kinds of strength." Day paused, then made a risky decision. "Would you like to meet some other people? I think they might help explain what I mean." Against her better judgment, Nara found herself agreeing. Day led her through the station to the engineering section. Here dozens of humans and aliens worked together to keep Harmony Point running. The noise was loud and sparks flew from welding torches as teams repaired damaged ships. "June!" Day called out to a man working on a large engine. The man turned around and Nara saw that he was in a wheelchair, much like her daughter's. But this was clearly a working chair, built for moving around the engineering bay. Tools hung from its sides and the man's clothes were dirty with honest work. "This is Lee June," Day explained. "He lost his legs in an accident 5 years ago. Now he's the best engine designer on the station. Ships come from 3 star systems just to have him work on them." June wheeled over and bowed politely to the Empress. "Your Majesty, it's an honor. I heard your daughter has been visiting the restaurant. Tai tells me she's very bright." Nara stared at this human who seemed completely comfortable with his disability. "You work? In important positions?" "Oh yes," June laughed. Actually, being in a chair helps me get into tight spaces around engines that walking people can't reach. My disability became my advantage. Next, Day took her to the medical bay where they met Dr. Choi Mira. She was a small woman who communicated using hand signs that were translated by a computer device. When she spoke, her voice came from the machine, but her expressions and gestures were full of life. Dr. Mira is deaf, Day explained, but she's revolutionized how different species communicate with each other. She developed the universal translation system that lets us all understand each other today. Dr. Mira smiled and signed something. Her computer voice said, "I tell my patients that my deafness helps me listen better to what their bodies are saying. Sometimes not hearing words helps you hear truth." Empress Nara was confused and unsettled. Everything she had been taught about weakness and strength was being challenged. These humans with disabilities were not hidden away or ashamed. They were working, contributing, and seemed genuinely happy. "How is this possible?" she asked Day as they walked back toward the restaurant. "How can your society function when you do not eliminate the weak?" Day stopped walking and turned to face her. "Your Majesty, we don't see them as weak. We see them as different. And different perspectives, different ways of thinking and solving problems make us all stronger as a community. But surely they are burdens on your resources. They require special equipment, special care." "Yes, they do," Day agreed. "And you know what? We're all better for it. Building a society that works for everyone makes it work better for everyone. The ramps we build for wheelchairs help people carrying heavy loads too. The communication devices for deaf people help in noisy environments. When we solve problems for people with disabilities, we often discover solutions that help everyone." Nara was quiet as they returned to the restaurant. Princess Hana was waiting at their table, reading something on a tablet. When she saw her mother, she quickly put the device away and looked nervous. "What were you reading?" Nara asked, but her voice was not as sharp as usual. "Just human stories," Hana said quietly. "They have tales about heroes who are different. Heroes who use their minds instead of swords, or who find strength in working together instead of fighting alone." That evening, back on her ship, Empress Nara called for her personal records keeper. "I want to see the intelligence reports on Princess Hana," she commanded. The keeper looked confused. "Your Majesty, we don't usually test the intelligence of disabled royals. It's not considered relevant. Test her now," Nara ordered. "I want to know everything about her capabilities." The test took 3 hours. When the results came back, the keeper's hands were shaking as he handed them to the Empress. "Your Majesty, these numbers—" "They're remarkable. Princess Hana scored in the top 1% for strategic thinking and problem solving. Her mathematics abilities are extraordinary. If these results are correct, she has the mind of a military genius." Nara stared at the reports. All these years she had been hiding away a daughter who could have been one of the greatest tactical minds in Valeth history. She had been so focused on what Hana couldn't do that she had never bothered to discover what she could do. Late that night, she went to her daughter's room. Hana was awake, looking out at the stars through her window. "Hana," Nara said softly. It was the first time she had used her daughter's name without the formal title in years. "What do you think about when you look at the stars?" Hana was surprised by the question and the gentle tone. "I think about all the different worlds out there. I wonder what kinds of people live on them, what problems they face, how they solve them. I think about how much we could all learn from each other if we tried." Nara sat down on the edge of her daughter's bed. "The human waiter Day showed you something today. What was it?"
"He showed me that I don't have to be ashamed of who I am," Hana said simply.
"He showed me that my chair doesn't make me less than other people. It just makes me different, and different can be good." As Empress Nara looked at her daughter's thoughtful face in the starlight, she realized that everything she thought she knew about strength and weakness was wrong. The humans had not just been kind to her daughter, they had been right about her. And if they were right about this, what else might they be right about? On the 4th day, everything changed. Empress Nara woke to urgent messages from her home world. A fleet of Velith warships was approaching Harmony Point, and they were not coming for the peace talks. The fleet was led by General Kyung, Nara's brother-in-law and one of the most traditional Velith nobles. He commanded respect through fear and believed that any sign of weakness should be crushed immediately. He had never approved of Nara allowing her disabled daughter to live. Nara met the general in the station's main docking bay. Kyung brought 50 armed soldiers with him, all wearing the black armor of the Veilith Elite Guard. Their weapons were powered and ready, though station rules said they could not fire unless attacked first. "Sister," Kyung said with a cold bow, "I have come because disturbing reports have reached the home world. You have been seen allowing the defective princess to interact with alien civilians. Worse, you have been letting her behave as if she has value." Nara kept her face calm, but inside she felt anger rising. "Princess Hana is my daughter and the heir to the throne. How I raise her is my decision. Not when your decisions affect the strength of the empire," Kyung replied. "The nobles are asking questions about your fitness to rule. A leader who shows weakness in her own family cannot be trusted to show strength to our enemies." Other species representatives gathered to watch the confrontation. The humans looked worried, especially when they saw the Veilith soldiers spreading out through the station. Day and his manager Yuna stood near the restaurant entrance ready to protect their customers if fighting started. "What do you want, Kyung?" Nara asked directly. "I want the princess removed to a proper Veilith facility where she cannot embarrass our people further, and I want you to prove you are still worthy to lead our empire." "How?" Kyung smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "Trial by combat. You and I will fight as our ancestors did. The winner leads the empire. The loser dies." A gasp went through the crowd of watching aliens. Trial by combat was an ancient Veilith tradition, but it had not been used for over a century. It was a fight to the death with no rules except that only traditional weapons could be used. Princess Hana had been listening from her chair near the restaurant. When she heard General Kyung's challenge, she felt ice in her stomach. Her mother was a great warrior, but Kyung was younger and had been training for combat his whole life. If her mother died, Hana would be taken away and hidden forever. Before Nara could answer the challenge, something unexpected happened. Princess Hana rolled her chair forward into the open space between the two adults. "Wait," she said in a clear voice that carried across the docking bay. "I have something to say." Kyung looked at her with disgust. Children do not speak in matters of imperial importance, especially defective ones. But Hana continued speaking, looking directly at the crowd of alien representatives. "I am Princess Hana, heir to the Veilith throne. I demand the right to be heard." Nara was shocked. Her daughter had never spoken so boldly before, especially not in front of so many people. But she also felt proud. Hana was showing the kind of courage that made great leaders. "Uncle Kyung," Hana said, using the formal title. "You say I am weak and shameful. You say I cannot contribute to our empire. But what if you are wrong? What if my differences make me stronger, not weaker?" "Impossible," Kyung snarled. "You cannot even walk. How can you lead warriors into battle?" "Because battles are not just won with swords," Hana replied. "They are won with strategy, with intelligence, with understanding your enemy and finding ways to defeat them that they do not expect." She gestured toward Day and the other humans. "These people have taught me that there are many kinds of strength. They have shown me that working together makes everyone stronger than fighting alone." Kyung laughed harshly. "Human weakness. They are a soft species that will be conquered by the first real military force they meet." "Then prove it," Hana said suddenly. "If humans are so weak, it should be easy to defeat them in any kind of test. But I think you are afraid to try anything except violence because you know they might show a better way." Empress Nara stared at her daughter. Hana was challenging Kyung without fighting him directly. She was using words and ideas as weapons, and they were working. The crowd was listening, and some of the alien representatives were nodding in agreement. Kyung's face turned dark with anger. "You dare suggest that I am afraid of these pathetic creatures? I suggest that true strength means being willing to test yourself in many ways, not just one," Hana replied calmly. "If you are truly the strongest leader for our empire, prove it by showing you can solve problems better than anyone else." Day stepped forward from the crowd. His heart was pounding, but he knew this was important. "Your Majesty, General Kyung, if I may suggest something." "A human speaks?" Kyung's voice was full of contempt. "This grows more insulting by the moment." But Empress Nara held up her hand. "Let him speak." Day bowed to both Veilith leaders. "In human culture, we believe that the best leaders are those who can bring out the strength in others, not just show their own strength. What if instead of fighting each other, you competed to see who could solve a real problem facing the galaxy?" "What kind of problem?" Nara asked, curious despite herself. Yuna, Day's manager, stepped forward with a tablet. "The peace talks have failed because no one can agree on trade routes. Every species wants the best paths for their own ships, but there aren't enough safe routes for everyone. It's a puzzle that needs both military knowledge and diplomatic skill to solve. Princess Hana's eyes lit up. A strategy challenge. Each leader gets the same information and has to come up with a solution. We can see whose plan works best without anyone dying. Kyung looked trapped. If he refused, it would look like he was afraid of a simple test. If he agreed and lost, he would lose face in front of the entire galaxy. But if he won, he could claim to be the rightful leader of the Empire. Very well, he said finally. But when I win this foolish game, the princess goes to a facility and I lead the Empire. And if Mother wins? Hana asked. Then I will accept her leadership, Kyung replied. But she won't win. The competition was set up in the station's main conference room. Both Empress Nara and General Kyung were given the same data about ship movements, trade needs, and danger zones. They had 2 hours to come up with a solution that would satisfy all the different species. As they worked, something interesting happened. Princess Hana asked if she could help her mother with calculations and data analysis. Kyung protested that this was cheating, but the rules said leaders could use any resources available to them. Hana's mathematical abilities were extraordinary. She could see patterns in the shipping data that adult minds missed. She found connections between different trade needs that created new possibilities for cooperation. But more importantly, she understood something that neither adult had thought of. She had been listening to the different species representatives for days, and she knew what each group really needed, not just what they said they wanted. While Kyung worked alone, focused on military efficiency and Valeth superiority, Nara and Hana worked together. They created a solution that was not just about the strongest ships getting the best routes. Instead, they found ways for different species to help each other, sharing resources and protection in exchange for access to routes. When time was up, both solutions were presented to the alien representatives. Kyung's plan was militarily sound, but left 3 species with no good options for trade. His answer was that weak species should accept poor routes or get stronger. Nara and Hana's plan was more complex, but it gave everyone something they needed. It required cooperation and trust, but it also created new opportunities for profit and growth that no one had seen before. The representatives voted unanimously for Nara's solution. Even the Valeth soldiers who had come with Kyung looked impressed. They had never seen their princess speak with such confidence or show such intelligence. General Kyung stood silent for a long moment. Then surprisingly, he bowed to Princess Hana. I was wrong, he said quietly. You are not weak. You see things that warriors like me cannot see. He turned to Empress Nara. Sister, your leadership is not in question, but perhaps our empire's ideas about strength need to change. That night, as the crisis passed and the various fleets prepared for peaceful departure, Day found Princess Hana sitting alone in the restaurant. She was looking out the window at the stars again, but this time her expression was different. She looked confident and thoughtful rather than sad and hidden. You were amazing today, Day told her. You probably just prevented a war. Hana smiled. I learned something important from you and your people. I learned that I don't have to be like everyone else to be valuable. I can be myself and still do great things. Yes, Day agreed. And sometimes being different is exactly what the galaxy needs. Outside the window, the Valeth fleet was preparing to return home. But they were not the same ships that had arrived in anger. They carried with them new ideas about strength, leadership, and the value of every person. The real test was just beginning. 6 months later, the Valeth Empire was a very different place. Empress Nara had returned home with new ideas and a new understanding of what made a civilization truly strong. The changes she began to make shocked many of her people, but the results spoke for themselves. The first change was the most dramatic. Princess Hana was no longer hidden away in the royal palace. Instead, she became her mother's official advisor on strategic planning. At first, the Valeth nobles were outraged. How could a disabled child hold such an important position? The answer came quickly. Hana's unique way of thinking about problems led to solutions that traditional military minds could never have imagined. When rebels on a distant planet threatened to destroy valuable mining operations, Hana suggested negotiating rather than attacking. Her plan saved both lives and money, and the former rebels became some of the Empire's most loyal citizens. News of these successes spread throughout Valeth space. Other disabled individuals who had been hidden or abandoned began to come forward. Nara established new schools and research centers where people with different abilities could develop their talents and contribute to society. One of the most successful programs was led by a former soldier named Tai Bin, who had lost his sight in battle. Instead of being retired in shame, he was given resources to develop his exceptional hearing and spatial awareness. He created new training methods for pilots that improved their skills dramatically. Soon other species were sending their pilots to learn from the blind flight master of the Valeth. Meanwhile, back at Harmony Point, the peace talks had concluded successfully. The trade route solution that Hana had helped develop was working better than anyone had expected. Different species were cooperating in ways they never had before, and prosperity was increasing across the galaxy. The humans had been accepted into the trade alliance, largely because other species had seen how their values of inclusion and cooperation created practical benefits. Day had been promoted to head of cultural relations at the station, helping different species understand each other better. Princess Hana visited Harmony Point regularly now, often bringing groups of young Valeth to learn about other cultures. She had become a bridge between her people and the rest of the galaxy, showing that strength came in many forms. On one such visit, Hana found Dai in the restaurant during a quiet afternoon. She was now 15 years old and had grown into a confident young woman. Her wheelchair had been replaced with an advanced mobility system of her own design that could navigate any terrain. "I have news," she announced excitedly. "The Galactic Council has asked me to speak at their annual meeting about cooperation between species. They want to hear about our empire's transformation." Day smiled proudly. "That's wonderful. You'll be the youngest person ever to address the full council." "I'm nervous," Hana admitted. "What if I say the wrong thing? What if I embarrass my mother or my people?" "You won't," Day said with certainty. "You know why? Because you'll speak from your heart, and your heart is full of wisdom and kindness. That's a language everyone understands." Hana looked out at the busy station where dozens of species worked and lived together peacefully. "Do you think we've really changed things? Or will people go back to the old ways when times get hard?" "Change is never easy or permanent," Day replied thoughtfully. "Each generation has to choose whether to build on the progress of those who came before, or tear it down. But I think you've shown people something important, that our differences make us stronger, not weaker." 3 weeks later, Princess Hana stood before the Galactic Council in the Great Assembly Hall on the neutral world of Concordia. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the vast chamber, their various forms creating a tapestry of the galaxy's diversity. Hana had chosen to speak without notes, trusting in her heart and mind to find the right words. She began by telling the story of a lonely girl who thought she was broken, and a kind waiter who showed her she was simply different. "I used to think that strength meant being like everyone else. Just better," she told the assembled delegates. "I thought that my wheelchair made me weak and shameful. But I learned something important from the humans and from all of you." She gestured toward the diverse crowd. "Every species in this galaxy has something unique to offer. The Quellian's ability to see in total darkness, the Morphic's talent for shape-changing, the human capacity for empathy and cooperation. These are not just interesting differences. They are tools that make all of us stronger when we work together." The hall was completely silent as she continued. "My empire used to believe that the weak should be discarded, and only the strong should lead. But we learned that this thinking was itself a weakness. When you throw away people because they are different, you throw away solutions to problems you haven't even discovered yet." A delegate from the Korthax, the species that had mocked her in the restaurant months ago, stood up to speak. "Princess, your words are inspiring. But how do we know this cooperation will work when real threats arise? When war comes, will philosophy matter more than military strength?" Hana smiled. "An excellent question. Let me answer with an example. Last month, a deadly plague threatened 3 worlds in our sector. Our traditional response would have been to quarantine the planets and let the disease run its course. The strong would survive, the weak would die." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "Instead, we contacted our new allies. Human doctors provided medical expertise. Quellian researchers who could work in contaminated areas provided data. Morphic volunteers who could change their biological structure helped test treatments safely. Working together, we stopped the plague in weeks instead of years. We saved millions of lives and gained knowledge that will help us face future threats." The Korthax delegate sat down, looking thoughtful. Other representatives began to murmur among themselves in dozens of languages. The galaxy faces challenges that no single species can handle alone, Hana continued. Climate change, resource depletion, cosmic threats from outside our galaxy. We can face these as enemies, fighting over scraps while our worlds die, or we can face them as allies, pooling our strengths to build something better. When she finished speaking, the hall erupted in applause that lasted for 10 minutes, but more importantly, delegations that had not spoken to each other in years began to approach one another to discuss new partnerships. After the speech, Empress Nara found her daughter on a balcony overlooking the city. "I am proud of you," she said simply. "Not because you are my daughter, but because you have become the leader our galaxy needs." Hana leaned back in her chair and looked up at the stars. "I keep thinking about that first day in the restaurant when Day taught me to dance. I was so ashamed of my chair, so sure that I was broken. Now I realize that my chair is part of what makes me who I am. Without it, I might never have learned to see the world differently." "The humans have a saying," Nara said. "What doesn't break you makes you stronger. But I think they have it backwards. It's not that you became strong despite your challenges. You became strong because of them and because you had people who helped you see that." 1 year later, the transformation was complete. The Valeth Empire had become the Valeth Commonwealth, a federation of worlds united by cooperation rather than conquest. Other empires had followed their example, creating a cascade of change across the galaxy. Day, now director of interspecies relations, often hosted cultural exchange programs at Harmony Point. Students from across the galaxy came to learn about cooperation and inclusion. Many of them wanted to meet the famous Princess Hana, but she always insisted they also meet the restaurant staff who had started it all. The galaxy was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still species that chose isolation or aggression, but something fundamental had changed. The idea that strength came from diversity was spreading, and with it came new solutions to old problems. In quiet moments, when Day cleaned tables after the last customers had gone home, he sometimes thought about that nervous young princess who had first entered his restaurant. He had simply tried to be kind to a lonely child, the way his grandmother had taught him. He never could have imagined that one dance, one song, one moment of human compassion would change the course of galactic history. But perhaps that was the most human thing of all, the belief that small acts of kindness could grow into something beautiful and vast. Princess Hana, now crown princess and heir to a commonwealth built on inclusion and cooperation, often returned to Terra's table. She would sit at the same table where she had first learned to dance, and she would watch new visitors from distant worlds discover what she had learned, that everyone has something valuable to offer, and that our differences are not obstacles to overcome but gifts to be shared. The galaxy was learning to dance together, each species moving to its own rhythm but somehow creating harmony. And it had all started with a human waiter who believed that dancing was not about your feet, but about your heart. In the end, that simple truth had proven stronger than any weapon, more powerful than any empire, and more enduring than any conquest. The humans had given the galaxy something it had never known it needed. The understanding that true strength comes not from standing alone, but from lifting each other up.